play, I think it starts it for everyone. But the purpose of the co-hosts having it in that language, it will record the picture with the audio, if that makes sense. Did it start for you, Violeta?
I'm recording it on a different computer, so I probably have to run back and forth. That's why I'm asking. Let me check it. I'll be back.
Alexa.
Si te quieres divertir con encanto y con primor, solo tienes que vivir un verano en Nueva York. Se levantan de rodillas tus amigos caprichosos, te llevan para las villas o a la montaña del oso, luego a la gira de barco o a la playa de Yeampierre, fiesta del mamoncillo o con la pompa en un charco. Si te quieres divertir con encanto y con primor, solo tienes que vivir un verano en Nueva York. El 4 la independencia, el desfile borinqueño, todo esto parece un sueño si lo gozan con prudencia. Fiesta folclórica quieres, allá en el parque central. Si de antemano no mueres, ves la fiesta de San Juan. Me dijo, un verano en Nueva York. Ay, allí se goza mejor. Un verano en Nueva York. Te vas a la fiesta de San Juan. Un verano en Nueva York. Un verano en Nueva York. Un verano en Nueva York. A la montaña del oso. Un verano en Nueva York. Oye, te llevan a guarachar. Un verano en Nueva York. Los amigos caprichosos. Un verano en Nueva York. Que nunca quieren parar. Un verano en Nueva York. Un verano en Nueva York. Un verano en Nueva York. ¡Juega, Rubio!
All right, everyone. I hope you all enjoyed the music while it was playing. But because we have a lot to get through today, we're going to get started. So before we dive into all the conversations, I wanted to make sure that we made an announcement that this meeting is being recorded and live streamed. And I also wanted to make an announcement about the interpreting services that we're providing. So Summer, if you could please share your screen with the second slide with the announcement. Awesome. So the organizers of today's event have made a strong commitment to creating a multilingual space. To that end, we have interpretation available in Spanish and Mandarin Chinese. Right after this announcement, we will activate the interpretation feature on Zoom. If you're using the Zoom application on your computer, you will see a globe icon at the bottom of your screen. To listen to interpretation, click on the globe and select English. If you are using Zoom on your phone, click on the three dots where it says More, choose Language Interpretation and select English. If you have any problems doing this, please comment in the chat box. Thank you. And also to our speakers, if we can ensure to speak slowly, not talk too fast so that translation is as accurate and best as possible.
Hola, solamente para resumir lo que ha dicho Sharon, espero que hayan disfrutado la música y la canción que tocamos. Y también queremos hacer un anuncio que este evento va a estar siendo dado en transmisión en vivo y también va a estar grabado. Y ahora vamos a hacer una breve introducción sobre la interpretación. Los organizadores del evento de hoy se han comprometido firmemente a crear un espacio multilingüe. Por ello disponemos de interpretación en español y en chino mandarín. Después de este anuncio, activaremos la función de interpretación en Zoom. Si utiliza Zoom en su computadora, verán un globo terráqueo en la parte inferior de su pantalla. Para escuchar la interpretación, haga clic en ese globo terráqueo y seleccione español. Si está utilizando la aplicación de Zoom en su teléfono, haga clic en los 3 puntitos donde dicen más. Elija Language Interpretation o Interpretación de Idiomas y seleccione Español. Si tiene algún problema al hacer esto, por favor, coméntelo o comuníquese a través del chat para que le podamos ayudar. Gracias. Y también una cosa más para las personas que van a presentar el día de hoy. Les vamos a pedir que por favor no hablen tan rápido, hablen despacio para que todo lo que se vaya a comunicar sea interpretado de la manera más precisa posible. Gracias.
Hello, maybe I can do the Chinese translation. Hello， 大家好，我是 Vicky， 还有知音，也是今天的就是翻译员。然后因为我们的负责人就是非常重视用多种语言开会，所以现在我们会有英文、西班牙文，还有普通话的翻译。所以就是请大家可以看着你，如果是用 Zoom 的话呢，可以看到有个地球的标志，然后按下去就会看到有3点。然后看到有3点之后呢，可以选择语言就是中文，就可以听到我们普通话的翻译，就是我们会日常的翻译的。谢谢大家，如果有什么问题的话呢，也可以就是在我们的聊天室，就是 chat box 可以放下，可以用中文，我们也会回应的。谢谢。Okay, thank you Sharon.
All right, and now the interpretation feature is activated. So you should be able to do that right now. And we'll just take a few seconds so that everybody who needs it can log on to interpretation. All right, and Summer, we can stop sharing the screen for now. Thank you. Awesome. So hello, everyone. My name is Sharon Rincon. I'm the climate justice organizer at UPROSE. Thank you all so much for being here and being part of this process to improve the community of Sunset Park. I also want to thank all the wonderful organizations who have made this event possible, such as the Climate Justice Alliance, who are running the technology for Zoom, NIJA, whose staff is participating to share about campaigns that we're working on, and the New York Lawyers for the Public Interest for coming to speak about our legislative achievements. Climate change is real and it's happening around us every day, especially in the Sunset Park community. Unsustainable human activity is causing this change and is not only making natural disasters more frequent and intense, but placing an unjust burden on working class communities of color like Sunset Park. By being here today, we're working towards a better future for ourselves and for future generations. I know that together we're going to be able to accomplish so much. We have a lot of amazing speakers here today to kick us off before we dive into the work that we've done and the work that we have to do. It's very difficult to sum up all of their amazing accomplishments, but I'm going to try my best. So our first speaker is Marcela Mitaynes, who was born in Peru and raised in Sunset Park, and now represents and fights for Sunset Park as its assembly member. She has a long history of activism, including being a member of Community Board 7, fighting for climate justice with UPROSE, and played a key role in the passage of the historic Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act to strengthen its rights of tenants and in rent stabilized apartments to defend their homes and communities in 2019 as an organizer. So now I'll pass it off to Marcela. Oh, Marcela, you're on mute.
Can you guys hear me? Okay, great. Thank you so much for the introduction. So I am Assemblymember Marcela Mitaynes. I just want to make sure, am I the only one that hears the echo?
There is a little sound back, but it's fine. You sound great.
Okay, so I'm just going to keep going. Thank you. I am Marcela Mitaynes. I am the Assembly member for the 51st Assembly District. I represent Sunset Park, Red Hook, and part of Bay Ridge. Currently at the State Assembly, we've been dealing with redistricting. So some of you may have heard that has really impacted the congressional district and what it looks like. And it's very important that people are aware. I'm going to talk about it a little bit here, but it's a part of a larger community conversation that we need to have. Currently, the district lines have been redrawn where Native Alaskans will only be our representative through the end of the year. The new representative would be Nicole Malatakis, and the district has been drawn in this way. It includes Staten Island, Bay Ridge, Sunset Park, Gowanus, and Park Slope. That is a huge change, and it has completely taken away any ground here in Sunset Park that belonged to Native, and now that is gone. I say that because it's important to understand what that means for us and how difficult it was for this community and how it fought to have representation, and people that are in power are making decisions based on their political future and not thinking about us. It's important that we understand what's happening and that we come together and that we educate ourselves and that we raise our voices. Anyone who's going to come and represent us needs to understand that they need to represent the people and its needs. I say that because we are also at a unique opportunity with the 3 levels of government, city, state, and federal, are actually locked in set on what we want to do and what we want to create and how we want to uplift our community. This has been a tough couple of weeks, but I'm here because I'm centered in the work that we need to do and the commitment to the community. Climate change is one of the greatest things that we're going to face. We know it's a man-made problem, and it's been caused and grown because of corporate greed. We have to combat it. It's not just about us, it's about our children and our future. We have worked so hard on the ground to ensure that we protect our working waterfront and really and truly work toward a Green New Deal. We need to prioritize the predominantly Black and Brown frontline communities, particularly Sunset Park, to ensure that we are part of the climate resiliency. My commitment to you is to continue to represent you and uplift the voices, to organize and ensure that everyone has a space and that we come together and make decisions together. And that as part of leadership, that I take the leadership of the people on the ground, the folks that have been doing this work, from the organizers, the organizations, and the community leaders. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much for those wonderful comments and for your commitment to the work that we're doing. Next up, we have Councilmember Alexa Aviles, who has lived in Sunset Park for 2 decades and has been committed to the fight for everyone to have the right to live a healthy, safe, and dignified life all throughout New York City. Throughout her long career, she has been dedicated to community philanthropy, and has worked to direct funds to local and national organizations working on human rights, the arts, and broader New York City community issues. So now I will pass it off to Councilmember Alexa Aviles.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. First, I want to thank UPROSE and the whole UPROSE staff, NILPI, Climate Justice Alliance, and everyone from the community that is here making this. Whoops. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. It's telling me I can unmute myself now after I'm talking. So again, just thank you to everyone. Thank you for being part of this conversation. My name is Alexa Aviles, and I am the newly elected council member for District 38. That includes Sunset Park, Red Hook, and portions of other neighborhoods in South Brooklyn. And so I'm so excited to be part of this conversation, to be part of this event tonight, and to let you know that, you know, the principles that I bring and my approach that I will bring to this role really is focused on centering the most directly impacted people, right? The work that UPROSE has been doing and leading in the community for so long, and its partner organizations for so long, where we are centered and we are first considered, right, in any kind of solution and approach. And it's just so important that we bring, not only that we center our communities, but that we really bring an expansive approach that addresses root causes. So we have seen for decades, un poquito por ahí, un poquito por allá, and our people are left behind. That means a little here, a little there, and still our people are left behind, and still our people in worse condition than they were so long ago. And yet UPROSE and its partners continues to bring a bold and visionary approach that really fully addresses the things that we need to do to address the crisis that we're in. And you've heard it been called a just transition, and that is what it is. It is a full transition, not here or there, not tinkering at the edges, and not trickle down economics. It is fully operationalizing something that is different, that centers communities most impacted, that works for people, and that works for the planet. And so I am trying my best, and I will be aligned here. I am an advocate in the fight. Sunset Park has an incredible opportunity to build on the decades of work led by UPROSE and NEJA and community members to operationalize and make real what we mean by a just transition. We have an industrial zone that we know we don't have to choose one poison or the other. That was the choice that was given to our communities for decades. We say no to one poison or another. We have the vision, we have the ovaries, we have the skill and the expertise that it requires to make sure that we choose differently. And so my commitment here is to this community, to people first, to a feminist vision, to a vision that lifts us up, keeps us healthy, and protects the planet. And so with that, I just want to thank you all so much. And I look forward to the conversation. And let's see, did I leave anything out? No, I don't know, but we'll be in conversation. So thank you again.
Thank you so much for those comments. And I know that some people have been trickling in. So if you need interpretation, please click on the globe at the bottom of your screen and select the language that you would need interpretation in. Thank you. And our final speaker of introduction speakers, we have UPROSE's very own Executive Director, Elizabeth Yeampierre. She's a climate justice leader fighting for just, sustainable development, environmental justice, and community-led climate adaptation and community resiliency in Sunset Park. She's been the Executive Director at UPROSE for 25 years, but before that, she was an incredibly accomplished attorney at the Puerto Rican Legal Defense Fund and American Indian Laws Alliance. Now I'll pass it off.
Thank you so much, Sharon. Mil bendiciones, mi gente. So grateful to follow courageous matriarchs. We are a leaderful community. The last 2 years have been so hard. We've endured the loss of our loved ones. We've lost homes, businesses. We've endured ICE raids, experienced food insecurity, and even had Democrats who call themselves progressives secretly convene to disenfranchise this beloved community who has shown up for each other every single time there is a crisis. And now we have to deal with the unpredictability of climate change. At UPROSE, we heard you when after Superstorm Sandy, you asked us to go further and deeper on climate change. And together we founded the Climate Justice Center. When faced with the massive threat of displacement, you came to us and asked us to fight against Industry City, and we did that together. At UPROSE, what you think, feel, and know is central to our activism, to our frame. We live here and we fight here, and we believe and we fight for what's sacred. The lives of our families, the future of our children is sacred. We are here on the ground, unlearning, decolonizing, disrupting, dismantling, while building and manifesting a vision of justice and equity for our people and the planet. And so today, after everything that we've gone through as a community and individually, I want to share with you what some of our victories are. I'm deeply humbled. I'm daily humbled and honored and inspired to live in Sunset Park and to fight and build with you. So I'll go through some of those victories right now, because it shows what a community can do despite everything. Let's see if I can just put them up. Hold on a second. Let me exit full screen a second because I can't find them. Okay. All right. I'm having a little bit of a problem. Okay, here we go. So amidst all of that, we were able to bring offshore wind to South Brooklyn Marine Terminal. January 20th, NYSERDA awarded $200 million for the largest offshore wind solicitation in US history after years of frontline community organizing, advocacy, and leadership to bring offshore wind to New York City's largest industrial waterfront, because we need to be able to bring green jobs to our community. Other than offshore wind funding, New York City also committed $191 million, and there were $25 million in federal funding. The Department of Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm visited UPROSE on June 29th for an environmental justice briefing, where we talked specifically about the need for investments in industrial waterfront communities like ours. We also launched the first hydroponic lab in a community-based organization in New York City, something that was sponsored by the New York Power Authority and its partner, New York Sunworks. On September 28th, Climate Justice Day of Action for Climate Action Week, many of you participated. October 22nd, we unveiled an intergenerational community mural. I may be going too fast for the photos. I knew this might be a problem. November, New York Renews. As part of the leadership of New York Renews, we engaged in a massive climate march. December 15th, we launched the Last Mile Coalition. We also launched helped launch the Peak Coalition. And the Peak Coalition is important because the Peak Coalition was designed to take those power plants that really pollute the most when the demand is the highest and hurt the health of our community, to take those down. And we were able to do that. October 26th, the Department of Environmental Conservation rejects 2 fossil fuel power plant repowerings, citing that the permits are inconsistent with the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, a piece of legislation that we also played a role in helping pass. On December 15th, the largest private power plant owner discontinues Article 10 proceedings to build another fossil fuel plant in Sunset Park after years of organizing and leadership. And we continue to work with our partners to develop and implement the grid. And so we're going to pivot so that you learn a little bit more about what you asked us to do. The grid was actually created because when Industry City came to repurpose the industrial waterfront, many of you in the community said that we needed a response, we needed alternatives. And the grid was a creation that brought together 10 years of community-based planning. Your vision, your ideas, your recommendation became the alternative to what an industrial waterfront can look like in New York City. And so now that we have been able to get past that, we're now talking about how we move forward to manifest that vision. So de corazón, gracias por el liderazgo. Thank you so much for your trust in our leadership. And thank you for working so closely with us and letting us know always what we need to be doing to look out for the people we love the most in our community. Gracias.
All right, thank you to our introductory speakers for those beautiful words. I know I'm feeling energized and inspired for our next round of speakers who are going to talk about some of the environmental justice problems in the community. So first off, we have UPROSE's Climate Resilience Coordinator, Violeta Munera Guerrero, who will speak about community health in Sunset Park.
Thank you, Sharon. I will now briefly do a presentation on the community profile for Sunset Park based on data for, as Assemblymember Mitaynes mentioned just earlier, Brooklyn's Old Community District 7, which I should note that it also includes the Windsor Terrace neighborhood. And I will start with some of the demographics. So the population in Sunset Park ranges between 130,000 and 132,000 people. And some sources of information actually estimate that the number of people to be as high as 142,000 people. So give or take a difference of 10,000. The largest segment of the population is between 25 and 44 years old, followed by 22% of residents that are under the age of 17. This makes the average age in Sunset Park of 37 years old. In terms of race and ethnicity, the numbers oscillate a little bit as Sunset Park is one of 17 neighborhoods that is gentrifying. Still, the numbers show that the Asian and Latino communities continue to comprise the largest segment of the population in Sunset Park, and that is over 70% combined. Though more recent data is starting to reflect a slight decline in the Latino and Hispanic population in Sunset Park. I just briefly talked about the composition of our community, which is going to be helpful in understanding and visualizing the Sunset Park as we prepare to plan a community-led green reindustrialization. So next slide, please. In 2020, UPROSE, with input from members of the community, launched the Climate and Community Vulnerability Assessment to help gather data on the intersection between climate and health. If you have yet to fill out a survey, there's still time to participate, and I will be sharing some links in the chat. So what is happening in Sunset Park with regards to community health and climate? Our preliminary findings tell us that many of our residents, when asked if they have been diagnosed with several chronic health conditions, they named the top five as allergies, asthma, emotional well-being, high blood pressure, and diabetes. Why does it matter? We know that environmentally burdened communities, that is communities that are near sources of pollution, such as highways and industrial facilities, are exposed to serious and long-lasting health impacts. In our vision of a green reindustrialization in Sunset Park, we have plans to mitigate these harms. Now, next slide, please. Many of you may remember Superstorm Sandy, and in its aftermath, as Elizabeth spoke, UPROSE organized a number of community meetings in order to respond to the community's request for help in adapting to climate change. When participants were asked if they had noticed changes in the frequency of extreme weather events, and they described those changes, these were some of the most frequent words. So we know that people are aware that there's more storms, the weather is hotter, there is flooding, and many other more. Interestingly enough, I believe that many of us are here today because we share concern around those changes. Naturally, we wanted to assess emergency and extreme weather events preparedness in the community. And what we have found so far, next slide, please, is that when participants are asked if they are prepared for the next extreme weather event, more than 50% are saying that they don't know. And approximately 33% said no. This is over 83% of participants. So we're not ready. Additionally, when asked if your household has a plan for an emergency, an overwhelming majority of people said no. Though many of participants were asked about needs for equipment and other stuff, people noted that they do need a plan because they need things as oxygen tanks, wheelchairs, insulin pumps, and other things. I'll leave it there. And when we go into our breakout rooms, we'll talk a little bit more in depth about this, and we'll hopefully start some planning that builds on some of the previous planning for more preparedness around these issues. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much for that background on community health, Violeta. Next up, we have Anthony Rogers-Wright from the New York Lawyers for the Public Interest, who's going to speak about legislation that has been passed that can enable UPROSE to achieve a green reindustrialization. And I just wanted to remind speakers to speak slowly to ensure the best translation possible. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sharon, and everyone from UPROSE. It is always an honor to share space with y'all. Big up to Philly, Sharon, and seeing so many amazing people here as well. Councilwoman Aviles, always amazing to see you. And yes, we're going to get into good trouble this year and get us some good justice as well. So great to be in partnership with you as always. As Sharon said, my name is Anthony Karifa Rogers Wright. I use him, his pronouns, and I'm the Director of Environmental Justice with the New York Lawyers for the Public Interest. And it's just always such a blessing to get to work with the amazing staff at UPROSE, as well as our friends from New York City Environmental Justice Alliance, who some are also on this call as well, who were really integral, even more so than New York Lawyers for Public Interest, at getting ratified some of the most aggressive pieces of policy in the country, and some say even the world. And I'm not being hyperbolic. Like, folk from Germany are literally calling us to ask questions about the CLCPA, which I'll get into, and the Climate Mobilization Act, which I'll also get into. Before I get into that, I just do want to say that every time I think of UPROSE, it makes me think of one of my favorite quotes from the book, The Power of One, which is small beat big right from start, first with the head, then with the heart. And this small but mighty organization has led to so much good, including the landmark 2019 Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. The reason why this is so important is because under the leadership of folk like Elizabeth Yeampierre, Eddie Batista, and so many other climate justice leaders, including folk from the Climate Justice Alliance, is that we understood that climate justice cannot be reduced to hashtags. And I don't mean to be disrespectful with ideas like Green New Deal, but they have not come into fruition because they were not frontline grassroots led. The Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, as Elizabeth alluded to, is already showing results, including the denial of permits for 2 fossil fuel peaker plants, which were literally poisoning people in our community. Add COVID to the mix, and it was even they were even more pernicious. The Climate Leadership Community Protection Act made that happen because of 2 specific sections. Section 7.3, which says that no action can occur that would result in a disproportionate impact or burden to environmental justice or disadvantaged communities like Sunset Park. And that was really, really huge. The Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act also calls for an 85% reduction in economy-wide emissions by 2050, including 0 emission electricity production by 2040. So we're moving forward with programs like the grid, offshore wind that Governor Hochul announced in her first State of the State, as well as with electric school buses. The other thing that I wanted to say that is just that what's really, really important about pieces of legislation like CLCPA is that policy cannot exist in a vacuum, y'all. As I like to say, policy without organizing is like trying to play jazz on beats 1 and 3. It's just not going to swing, and you're not going to move people, and people can't move their hips to the beats on the 1 and 3. The organizing is extremely important. This is what we learned from the good folk at UPROSE, NEJA, and whatnot. And I also want to remind people that to get policy like Climate Leadership Community Protection Act, organizing is both intergenerational and intergenerational. So I see that I'm wrapping up with 30 seconds or so left. I just want to say that the reason why this is also important is because, as we heard, we cannot wait for federal action. We can't wait for Build Back Betters or BIFs or bipartisan infrastructure, this or that. We have to do that as a people on the ground with bottom-up organizing. As the councilwoman said earlier, there's no such thing as trickle-down economics. There's also no such thing as trickle-down social justice, which is why we have to continue leading from the ground and building off the Climate Leadership Community Protection Act, which is already informing and influencing federal policy, including Joe Biden's Justice 40 initiative, which we hope to see into fruition. And I do want to close and say one of the most important things about the CLCPA and why it's so important that it was led by groups like UPROSE is because 40% of investments, and I want to be clear, the money, not the benefits, the investments must be allocated to communities like Sunset Park and other disadvantaged communities throughout the state. And that's why we always have to make sure that we're always working with the organizations who are actually accountable, like UPROSE, to the communities that they serve. I look forward to getting into this a bit more with you in the breakout rooms where I can show Naisha the dope sneakers that she inspired me to buy. I finally got the Air Force Ones, fam. And just thank you so much for this opportunity. It's just a blessing to be with y'all. Peace. Peace.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Anthony, for sharing all those updates and victories with us. Next, we have Kevin Garcia, who's the transportation planner at the New York City Environmental Justice Alliance, or NEJA, and he's going to speak about last mile distribution centers and the coalition that is formed to regulate them.
Great. Thanks so much, Sharon. And thank you so much to UPROSE for inviting NEJA. And also thank you to the council member, Alexa Aviles, and Assemblymember Mitaynes for being here, and for all the other groups who are here. I'll get started. So my name is Kevin Garcia. I am the transportation planner with the New York City Environmental Justice Alliance, pronouns he, him, and on living on Lenape land. If we go to the next slide, so it was brought to our attention that there were 6 last mile distribution facilities that were being developed, erected, and planned for Red Hook and Sunset Park. And what this is causing was an increase in trucking, traffic, and air pollution and emissions from the trucks. If we go to the next slide. So the reason this was happening is there is a rise and an increase in buying and selling of goods online or e-commerce. And in particular with the pandemic, a lot of folks were still trying to socially distance and buying basic goods such as diapers, for example. So today, over 2 million packages are delivered just in New York City. Now, if we go to the next slide, we'll see that the bigger reason that this is being allowed to happen is that the New York City Department of City Planning treats these facilities as warehouses. And that's based off of the zoning resolution, which was adopted in 1961, and the performance standards have not been updated. So what happens is that these facilities are built as of right in manufacturing districts and C8 districts, which tend to be found in or near communities of color, populations with high immigrant populations, low-income families, essentially environmental justice communities. So what this means is that there is no public review process and there's no environmental review process. If we go to the next slide, so what you're going to start seeing is an increase in truck traffic, an increase in noise pollution, an increase in emissions, which it's going to lead to an increase in air pollution. You're also going to see less safe streets because these trucks, these vans are big. They're going to be taking over the streets, but also a clustering of these facilities and environmental justice communities because of what I mentioned earlier. They are being erected as of right in manufacturing districts, and there's no prevention of them being built so close to each other. If we go to the next slide. So what we're going to do is we're at the city level going to try to get a zoning text amendment, which will define last mile facilities in the zoning resolution. And then also based off of size and based off the number of trucks and deliveries per facility, we're also going to try to seek a special permit process that makes it so that there is a public review process of these facilities to prevent clustering, for example, but also seeking alternative modes of delivery, such as electric vans, electric trucks, electric bikes as well. And then at the state level, with the help of Assemblymember Mitaynes, we're going to be looking to introduce state legislation that's also going to regulate these facilities. And if we go to the final slide, if you'd like to get involved or you would like to learn more, please feel free to check off the box for the Last Mile Coalition on the follow-up form, and I'll probably be participating in the breakout room, so happy to answer more questions. But thank you all so much for listening.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kevin, for all that valuable information. Next, we have Daniel Chu, who's the energy planner at NEJA, and he's going to speak about power plants and the burden that they put on to frontline communities and the peak coalition that is formed to fight them.
Can hear you, Daniel.
Hey everyone, can you hear me now? Okay. Hi, my name is Daniel Chu. I'm the energy planner at NEJA and my pronouns are he, they. And in my role as the energy planner, I help organize the Peak Coalition, which includes us, UPROSE, The Point, New York Lawyers, which is Anthony, and Clean Energy Group. We're the nation's first comprehensive effort to reduce the negative and racially disproportionate health impacts of a city's peaker plants by replacing them with renewable energy and storage solutions. Recently, one of the biggest achievements that we've done is the Energy as Storage permit denial, which we submitted extensive comments on in its environmental and health hazards that are inconsistent with the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. To this end, UPROSE, NEJA, and other organizations, including NILPI's legal support, are working together to help stop the appeal process that NRG has issued with the Department of Environmental Conservation to make sure that the power plant does not power up. To this end, we also have new clean energy transmission lines that we fought for that are coming to New York City that will help reduce the burden of polluting demand energy in New York. And also we stopped the Gowanus Empowering from issuing their Article 10 proceedings. More recently, in January, the governor has issued commitments on offshore wind, including committing $500 million of new investments to offshore wind, and the assembly facility to constructing a lot of these offshore wind will be in Sunset Park. Finally, in the next few months, we will be finalizing our work with the New York Power Authority, which examines how we can shut down the city's publicly owned peaker plants in the near future. And we hope to issue that report as soon as March. On top of that, we continue our legislative support for different acts and legislations, both on the city, state, and the federal level. For example, we recently issued our support for the Justice in Power Plant Permitting Act, which would require that all permitting for power plants do a cumulative impact assessment within a 1 mile radius to make sure that there is no added health or environmental hazards, and to make sure that any permit that will pose such hazards will be denied unless a reliability concern is posed. On top of that, we are also supporting the Pollution Justice Act in the New York State Legislature, which makes sure that most peaker plants in New York City will be shut down by 2030, and that the most polluting and oldest and dirtiest plants will be shut down in the near future. We continue our opposition to false solution petitions and bills, such as the zero emissions bill circulating in New York State Senate, which would undermine the definition of what a zero emissions-free technology is under the CLCPA. We also, in the process, engaged with Con Edison on transmission improvement and solar projects. P continues to build on renewable and storage solutions with private stakeholders to make sure that private companies can understand that peakers are infeasible with the future of New York City's energy system. One of our biggest concerns right now is to address how renewable and storage solutions can stabilize energy bills. So events like this week's surprise rate hikes that we see from Con Ed doesn't happen or happen less frequently. And throughout the process, we will always be focused on closing all the peaker plants in New York City. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Violeta, Anthony, Kevin, and Daniel for all that wonderful, wonderful information and sharing all the work that you have done to combat these serious issues in our communities. Now we're going to shift gears to the work that UPROSE has done to build on community meetings back in 2016 and the work that was born out of the fight against Industry City. Summer Sandoval, our Energy Democracy Coordinator, is going to speak about the grid, or the Green Resilient Industrial District, which is a step towards establishing environmental solutions for Sunset Park. We're also joined by Juan Camilo Osorio, an assistant professor in the Graduate Center for Planning at Pratt University, and a longtime collaborator and ally of UPROSE, who will be answering any questions about the grid.
Awesome, thank you, Sharon. Everyone can hear me, right? Okay, great. So again, really appreciate our partners coming here and joining us and giving us those wonderful overviews of the campaigns that we are working on. So definitely remember to stay and join the breakout rooms if you want to learn more about how to get involved in the different campaigns that you just heard about. Let me click. Okay, here we go. So now to jump into talking about the grid. So I want to start off with giving a brief overview and review of jumping into the different pieces of what is the grid, how is the grid developed, and since the defeat of the Industry City rezoning proposal that was withdrawn September of 2020, where has the grid gone? How's it moved and developed, and where is it today? So I'm going to give those updates and then we'll open for Q&A. So to show what many people have mentioned, this is a brief snapshot and timeline of how the grid has developed over the years. And so the grid was not was not created in a vacuum. It was part of a comprehensive community facilitated planning framework and model. It's been informed by a lot of different processes that have gathered community feedback, community input, and really has integrated and incorporated community priorities in a way that brings us into the grid. So it is a comprehensive community-led plan that looks at things like land use, zoning, policy, energy, housing, transportation, food, and how all of those things can work together so that we can be really utilizing, what Elizabeth had mentioned, the largest industrial waterfront in New York City for climate adaptation, mitigation, and resilience. So here, this is from a news article documenting how, the community alternative, the grid, played a major role in defeating the, very conventional private developer-led proposal to rezone 3.3 million square feet of Sunset Park's industrial area and to use for luxury commercial, hotel, and office uses, all of uses that are really inconsistent with helping move city and state investments to create well-paying local jobs. And so here, also documenting how we've worked with different coalitions and partners to continue working and developing the grid in different ways. I'll be particularly talking about the partnership with the Pratt Graduate Center for Planning and Environment. We've worked with GCPE for the last 2 years in 2 different studios to really hone in on how to explore and to look at specific sites, recommendations, and projects that can come directly from the grid and directly be funded and supported by these public and private investments from the policies that Anthony talked about. So here is a overview of some of the grid's 4 main goals. So one is to preserve New York City's largest industrial waterfront, to implement the green reindustrialization. 2, to retain and create well-paying and accessible local green jobs. And 3, to support and move investments and resources to Sunset Park for climate adaptation, mitigation, and resilience. And 4, promote racial and social justice in all workforce and economic development. Now let's kind of talk about the difference between the grid, which is a community-led comprehensive plan, and a lot of the more siloed plans that we see from private developers that are very profit-driven, profit-focused, and really is a model that builds off of the extraction of the community, both in terms of really gentrifying in terms of gentrification and displacement, as well as extraction of labor, where a lot of the models we see from private developers coming into the community, where they try to sell the community on jobs, but then after taking a closer look at the types of jobs, they're mostly only entry-level or service jobs that are accessible to the community. So looking at how we can really use the grid to make sure that good, well-paying jobs are coming to our community, and that all levels of jobs, despite training and certification requirements, are truly accessible to people in the community, so that we're not only building infrastructure that is, both healthy and sustainable, but that the economic opportunities that come from these investments are held and built in the community, and that local small businesses are supported as well. And here's another graphic that's really showing how the grid is is and can be utilized to inform a scalable approach for just transition. So looking at how community-led processes and projects can both be supported by policy and investments, but also how connecting to the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, how we move funding as part of the equity mandate part of policy to reduce pollution that both Kevin and Daniel talked about, from trucks and from burning fossil fuel power plants, to also be building more clean energy in the community, to making sure that there is access to healthy and affordable food, transportation, housing, and education, and which is all part of the lens of implementing climate justice and achieving climate justice victories, as you heard in the beginning. So connecting all of this together, how all of these moving pieces are working together for this one community-led, grassroots-led vision of the grid. And why do we have to do this? This is so important because climate change is already here and it's impacting environmental justice communities like Sunset Park the hardest, those same communities that are the least responsible for climate change, but most impacted. This is a map that came out of the last studio report, which is looking at what the floodplain for the industrial waterfront looks like in 2100. And so given that we know, there are both known and unknown impacts of climate change, ranging from extreme heat to flooding to sea level rise, and how we can really use all these different tools to prepare for that and to make sure that our communities are protected, not only protected, but can thrive in the face of climate change. So here's a quick review slide on, so what is the grid? So the grid stands for the Green Resilient Industrial District. There's a lot more information on our website if you are interested in looking at different pieces of the grid, and how the grid is really the culmination of community-based planning and priorities, operationalizing climate policies and moving resources and investments into communities to be able to address the climate impacts, create good jobs, support small businesses, and then also be supporting schools, clean energy development, and access to transportation. And with that, I want to pivot to start talking a little bit about some of the more recent work on the grid and show you some of the really exciting work that has come out of the partnership with the Graduate Center for Planning and Environment on identifying some community-wide and site-specific recommendations that have come through a process that also involved community-based planning and input throughout. Okay. So this image is looking at the Resilient Water Hub, which is a community-wide approach the way we mapped the whole community and identified site-specific opportunities. I'm not going to go through all of this projects or opportunities, but this visual is just giving an idea of spatially what we can do. There's so many different things we can do in terms of implementing the grid. And so this is really showing, how we can do energy, how we can be looking at green spaces and parks, how we can be doing workforce development, all comprehensively at the same time to really prepare for the climate impacts. And so one is workforce training. This is super important because you might have, from the previous speakers, there's a lot of both public and private investments going into clean energy and infrastructure. And so these are, we're talking about multi-million and billion-dollar investments into infrastructure. And so with those investments, there are also going to come a lot of jobs. How many jobs are we talking about? So even just between New York State policy and New York City policies that have that will be creating jobs, we're talking about over 200,000 jobs in the next 10 to 20 years will be created in this, what you can call like the clean energy economy, or just transition or regenerative economy. And these are jobs like sustainable manufacturing, clean energy development, engineering, construction, a lot of trades related jobs. These are the jobs that are going to be directly and indirectly involved in building and planning and implementing projects that will reduce polluting emissions and that will address climate change. And so, like I mentioned before, we've been starting to do a lot of work in figuring out what are those types of jobs, what number of jobs, how can we make sure the highest number of jobs can land directly in Sunset Park, and how can we make sure that the jobs that are created are accessible, that local hiring is successful, and that the adequate amount of training and education and support is being developed locally. The second thing I want to talk a little bit about is green infrastructure. Going back to that floodplain map where you see the floodplain by 2100 going all the way in some parts touching 4th Avenue, this is going to be a really big issue. So how do we deal with water and flooding? This is really important. And so one of the main ways we're going to be doing this is with green infrastructure. And green infrastructure is a way that we use the natural water cycle to help retain, capture, and filter water. And this is water from storms, from flooding, from sea level rise, so that it is not moving contaminants through the community, that it is not moving pollution through the community, and that both the community and the buildings are protected from this water that is coming from climate change. And so this is kind of visual of how a lot of green infrastructure is built, kind of like the different layers and how it works. And then these are some examples of what green infrastructure can look like. It can look like, these big, what they call rain gardens or bioswales that take up like the picture in the top left with the tree pit. It's basically like, and you might have seen this. They have some throughout the city, but it might just look like a really, really nice, a really large like tree pit, but it's also called like a bioswale or a rain garden where, this one piece can be holding and retaining and filtering hundreds of gallons of water at a time. And so there are some other examples from green roofs on the bottom left and the larger rain garden, on the right. So these are just some examples of green infrastructure. And then what are the opportunities in Sunset Park? And so since Sunset Park is New York City's largest industrial waterfront, a lot of the buildings in the community are large commercial and industrial buildings that have those low and large rooftops. These rooftops are perfect for different climate projects to build them on top of the rooftop. So we don't even have to build new things, but that we are repurposing these large rooftops that are laying empty, and we can use them for green roofs. We can use them for food sovereignty and producing food locally. Through COVID, we've seen a lot of disruption in local supply chains and the access to healthy and affordable food. This is something that's really important that just is going to get worse with climate change. So how can we address this issue with existing buildings? We can use buildings and rooftops in different spaces in the community to be producing food locally, to be building out and supporting local food businesses and local food production, to make sure that the community through the climate change has access to food. And then lastly, I also want to talk about some of the opportunities in terms of transportation. And so I think everyone on the call is super aware of all of the impacts of diesel trucks and traffic and trucks in the community. Even the Gowanus Expressway sees over 200,000 cars and 25,000 diesel trucks every single day. And that number is only increasing as, last mile trucking facilities pop up throughout the community, like Kevin was talking about. And a lot of other projects are coming up that will bring even more truck traffic to the community. So some of the interventions, some of the recommendations we are looking at is how to support and promote transportation through maritime, so water uses, as well as electric vehicles. So things where we can charge up at a charging station. That charging station can be powered by renewable clean energy, think like solar or offshore wind. And if you look at the graph on the right, looking at how many trucks we can really take off the streets if we are supporting these types of solutions with electric vehicles. They can be these like little electric trucks that you see in the bottom right picture, electric cargo bikes, as well as other larger electric vehicles, and then maritime uses as well. So barges, ships that also are zero emission, so that they aren't burning, other fuels to be powered. This is going to be a really important aspect of being able to reduce pollution in the community and support how things are moved, how goods are moved, so that people have access to goods. This is about how to make things more climate resilient, more equitable, and healthier. It's not about making people feel bad because they need to order something online. It's about making our systems work for people. It's how we make our systems really grounded in climate justice, so that everyone has access to the resources, to the goods, and to the needs to be able to live healthy and thriving lives, but that not one community or communities are paying the price for that. And so I want to end there. There are so many more projects and recommendations and ideas that we've been developing with our partners, both at Pratt, EDC, Climate Justice Alliance, Environmental Justice Alliance, and a lot of the partners on today. This was just a quick little snapshot at some of the projects that we want to share. And so, this process, like I said, it's a community facilitated process where we want to make sure that every project, every initiative is fully honoring and being informed and led by community needs and priorities. So with that, I'm going to pivot so that we have more than enough time for some question and answer. That Juan Camilo, who's also one of the professors and the last Pratt Studio, will help be answering questions. So thank you so much for listening, and I hope you have some questions.
Well, Summer, there was a question in the chat about this might already be covered in the presentation, but what's the financing model of repurposing the large commercial and industrial buildings? Is it all part of the money put for the Green Industrial District? Do you want to address that? Do you want me to share some thoughts on?
It'd be great if you could share some thoughts on that and I can add in. Thank you, Juan Camilo.
Absolutely, Summer. Well, first of all, thanks so much to UPROSE for the invitation. It's really a privilege to be here and a pleasure to partner with you. I just want to highlight something that was already said in the presentation. You heard UPROSE and some of the partners talk about 200,000 jobs that are coming to the area. And they're coming to the area particularly to seek the type of goods and the type of services that will be required for the reindustrialization, for the regreening, and for the regeneration of an industrial core to be able to meet all of the challenges. So in other words, while UPROSE and the partners are changing the legislation, changing the rules of the game to require cleaner, more sustainable, and more resilient neighborhoods, UPROSE has positioned Sunset Park at the center of what could be a demonstration project of how to attract these jobs and this type of industrial development. So it's actually from the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act and the alike legislations that, as you heard from New York Lawyers from the Public Interest, from Anthony, there's a mandate to return 40% of all the different savings from energy performance back to communities like Sunset Park. So the money that can fund visions like this, as I said, as Sunset Park, positioning Sunset Park as a demonstration project of what could this look like, can actually fund and pay for the type of infrastructure improvements that need to be, that are being discussed. The last thing that I would say in this is that in addition to funding all of these improvements, the UPROSE's grid plan has centered these improvements in connection to provision so that the community who lives in Sunset Park right now and the community that works in Sunset Park doesn't have to be displaced as a result of potential unintended consequences of such improvements. But contrary to that, that there's a workforce development program so that people who live in the community right now can take advantage of these opportunities as part of their own right and their request for justice.
Thank you, Juan Camilo. And I also would just add that financing and creating community-led and community-centered financing models are super important and has been a part of all of this work that we just shared today, that we're not only trying to move direct investments, but making financing models really accessible to communities and to community entities as well. And that has a lot to do with changing how the market is, because all of our work is about how we can create equitable markets. So it's not only making sure that financing and grant funding is accessible, but also that we are creating a market that is really accounting for value in equity, value in resilience, and value in frontline community leadership. And so for a little bit more information about some of that work, definitely check out the link I just put in the chat. We will be putting together definitely other resources that document some of the other questions we don't get to. But if there are other questions I want to look through in the chat.
Summer, there was a follow-up question about how to address or anticipate potential challenges in terms of and how to implement the Green Resilient District in a democratic manner. I can add to what you said, but let me know if you want to take the lead and I can follow.
That's a really good question, because there are a lot of challenges, which, we talked a little bit about earlier. I think something to really re-emphasize in terms of challenges is that we're not only trying to create new systems and new models, but we're also trying to stop what you might think of as business as usual or conventional models. These are the models that have, led to so much gentrification and displacement of our communities. And, these models of development are, really harmful, and they exacerbate harm, from health disparities to access to well-paying jobs and education and infrastructure. And so there are a lot of challenges, because it is difficult to both trying to build something and also fight against proposals that put our communities in harm's way, but also proposals that threaten the ability for our community to implement the solutions. So think about Industry City. That was a 7-year fight that took 7 years of effort that we could have been using to implementing a lot of these projects. So it definitely posed a really big obstacle and a lot of challenges in terms of implementing a lot of these projects. I don't know if Elizabeth, you want to add anything to that specific question, or Juan Camilo?
No, I think that's right, Summer. These campaigns take years, and we have been doing a number of things at the same time. We're not just trying to move a repivoting of the industrial sector so that we're not following the market but creating it, but we're also working at the city, state, and federal level to get investments for this kind of infrastructure. So from a national level, we've been trying to ensure that there are investments in infrastructure that moves us away from fossil fuel dependency. On the statewide level, we passed the CLCPA, and on the citywide level, we've also made sure that there are resources so that we have short, mid, and long-term solutions. At the same time, we're seeing a shift in representation in our district, and we don't know whether the priorities that we have are the priorities that are going to be shared by new leadership that really cares so little about Latino representation. So we have some challenges. We are literally moving to create a model that can be replicable and that is going to benefit the region. And at the same time, we're also faced with environmental justice threats, which were outlined by our partners earlier today. So it's a lot, and it's going to involve the community being meaningfully engaged, participating in all these campaigns, reflecting, sharing information, letting us know what the hot spots are and what the challenges are, and working with each other so that we can address a lot of these challenges, because they are big and they require a leaderful response. And in a community that is being gentrified, what you find is that local leadership that is frontline led is often supplanted by privilege. And so we want to make sure that is those people, our aunties, our viejitos in the neighborhood, who are speaking truth to power and making sure that they are involved. So yeah, I mean, it's a lot, but I think that the vision is beautiful, and it really comes out of deep, deep, deep community engagement and the support of our partners in this work.
There's another question about how would immigrants be able to benefit from these types of jobs?
What was the question again?
There's a question about how could immigrant residents benefit from these types of jobs?
Anytime that you are working in what is largely an immigrant community to create green jobs, clearly immigrants are going to benefit. We want to make sure that there are historically racially marginalized communities and immigrants both benefiting from all of these jobs. And we have been doing work on supply chain, on the gaps in terms of the skill sets and how to match those up to the number of jobs or the kinds of jobs that we're being told are available. And we want to make sure, and we have been advocating to ensure that the jobs are local. One of the things that we've learned over time is that regardless of how hard industrial partners on the waterfront have worked, and also unions, that they rarely are able to hire people locally, that they basically are hiring people from throughout New York City and the region, and that they are not able to retain, and train people in the local neighborhood. This is intended, all of this work that we're doing, to hire people locally. And in order to do that, we need to know what their job skills are, how we can make sure that they develop the skills that they need so that we can match them. And so all of that is part of a just transition. Summer, I don't know if you want to add to that.
No, I think that was it. I've been putting some links in the chat. So thank you everyone for your questions.
Summer, one thing that I would love to highlight from what you said earlier, and probably something if you can expand, is how the grid is really taking community engagement and planning to another level by, in addition to creating job opportunities, really taking advantage of the solidarity economy to create worker-owned cooperatives, community land trusts, so that the community can take direct control over land and over infrastructure to take advantage of this. I'm wondering if you can expand a little bit on that.
Yeah, no, that's a really important part, and thank you for really flagging that. In a lot of, I guess to reiterate, a lot of the work around the grid and implementing grid projects, throughout the community is something to really take note, is that we're not just looking at the outcome outcome, and that just transition is not just about putting, green roofs on roofs, or not just putting solar panels on tops of roofs. The just transition is about fundamentally changing how power is shared, how leadership appears, and how decisions are made. And so those are all really integral parts of the process, and that we're talking about, systemic and process-based change as well, which is all part of a lot of our campaigns. For example, with the last mile work that Kevin shared, we're looking at how a process can be changed, that, where business as usual build out of these giant facilities, bringing tons of trucks into environmental justice communities with no public input, with no public or environmental review, how we can change that process so that most impacted communities like Sunset Park, like Red Hook, have a say in what are the priorities, what are the concerns, and have those priorities and needs really be shaping how land use and how development looks like. It's about how we really are incorporating equity, at the root of it, how we are incorporating equity in these different processes, from permitting to land use to public review, to make sure that in all different ways we can really be building, but not only building the right infrastructure, and making sure that communities are really building long-term wealth.
So I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm just sorry to interrupt, but we're running into the time for our breakout rooms. And so I just we may have to end right here, but we'll be available to answer questions. This is not the last time we're meeting, and this is not the last time you have access to this information or to us. So, but I think community participation in this is important, so we should pivot. Sharon, thank you so much. Juan Camilo and Summer.
Yeah, thank you both for that illuminating presentation on the grid and answering all those questions. So now that we've learned all about these different campaigns and initiatives, we're going to move into our breakout rooms and share thoughts and feelings about the grid and other things that we've spoken about to see how we can improve and take action now. So before we go into breakout rooms, I wanted to quickly go over the rules of engagement. When participating in discussion, think wait or why am I talking, share the space. One mic, try to have one person speaking at a time. Expect unfinished business. We're not gonna be able to solve everything today, but we can at least start some really good dialogue. Be authentic to yourself, to your ideas, critiques, and take risks. Don't feel scared to say something. What is shared stays, what is learned leaves. Seek first to understand and then to be understood. Remember that we're all teachers and learners. We're all learning from each other. Create together. Throw glitter, not shade. Try to be kind and gentle in your comments. Ask for clarity when needed, and honor and respect each other's time and energy. So with that, now we're going to go into breakout rooms. We have a breakout room in Spanish, and we'll be able to self-select. We have a breakout room for any Mandarin speakers and 2 English-speaking breakout rooms. So Veronica, if you can, oh, here we go. If you can click join and join a breakout room.